The interview show would like to thank Cards Against Humanity, Lifeway Foods, It Takes Guts, Field Notes, vintage-styled, made-in-the-USA pocket notebooks at 401 North Racine in Chicago or fieldnotesbrand.com, and Lagunitas. Beer speaks, people mumble, except on the interview show.
So I want to start with, it was about a year ago, you were arrested.
Yeah.
You were in the front lines of the protests for the shooting of Laquan McDonald by a police officer, and you were arrested for allegedly punching a police officer,
Yeah.
and then you were released, charges dropped the next day. And I want to get to that, but I want to back up and say, what got you to that point? What got you to where you were on the front lines, one of the leaders of the protest? I guess I'm asking for your life story.
So there's a really amazing thing in the city of Chicago called Louder Than a Bomb, which is a youth, makes sense for Louder Than a Bomb.
Kevin Koval, he's been on the show.
Yeah, a mentor of mine that really is about making education autonomous or making, young people have autonomy in their own education. And for me, I graduated high school with a 1.9 GPA, and I wear that as a gold watch most days because I think that is indicative of how our education system is terrible.
Yeah.
Well,
you said it. You said that the education system is not made for teaching kids to explore new things, but to keep them confined.
Yeah. The most important thing I learned about poetry, which later gave me the confidence to be an organizer, was essentially I just learned how to fall in love with myself. And unfortunately, our education system doesn't teach young people how to do that.
You get involved in the poetry scene. You become increasingly involved in activism, and then it's also at a moment when really activism is through social media, through other things, and through events that have always happened in history but are getting a lot more attention. And then you find yourself on the front lines at this protest. And what happened?
Yeah, so unfortunately, the same as you talked about history, this country doesn't, not many governments, appreciate people who say things that are anti to the establishment. And so I guess on that night, I was leading a protest, I was leading a protest and essentially arrested for doing just that. The moment was somebody let off a smoke bomb in this intersection on Roosevelt in Michigan. And I'm like telling people, this is, saying very passionate, what I imagine ingenious things, right? And the next thing I know, someone lets off a smoke bomb across the street from me and a cop comes up to me, who I'd been talking to all night, and says, "You responsible for that smoke bomb?" And I laughed, I hit him with the Kanye shrug, like, of course not. Like, I've been leading this protest, and then 8 police officers arrested me and choked me, and I passed out. And when I came to, it was 100 people surrounding the police car trying to get me out of that. But,
you said something interesting afterwards. You said, or maybe it was before, but it was, Laquan McDonald, what happened to him was not what happened because of the cop. It happened long before that. Right. It was the system. It was fast food restaurants. It was, I forget exactly what the quote was.
Yeah. I said that in the song Charlie. On the tape. But yeah, man, we have to. Racism exists in America, and if we can't even have that conversation publicly to say that it does, then things like poverty and mass incarceration and the closing of 50 schools in the city of Chicago and the unemployment rates that are disparities of those things will continue to happen. And so, Laquan McDonald is a definitely a person who was killed by an officer who probably needed to get some therapy or whatever. Yeah. But these aren't just isolated events. It's it's a systemic thing, and we have to all be involved in that to change it from the root.
one argument you hear a lot is the pick yourself up by the bootstrap.
Right, yeah.
It's for whites, it's for blacks, it's particularly for blacks, I realize. And they might point to you and say, look, you've done it, you've succeeded. You came from a poor area, and you are a really, really good poet.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Thanks.
No, I'm not saying that. That's what they're saying. No. And you've got a new album out, and you've got a bright future, and there's going to be more albums and more poems. What's wrong with that argument? The argument that says, you can do it, so why can't everybody else do it?
I've been, blessed in some ways to be in this position, but I'm also just one bullet hole away from being another statistic on the west side of Chicago. I'm still one of many grandsons being waited for to come home at night, right? Like, that's still a thing. And just because, I'm on this awesome show doesn't mean I'm exempt from that. And that's how racism plays in America, that even at a successful moment. Like even my friends, like Vic Mensa, Chance the Rapper, we still experience, we're still living our skin. And so that's just a testament to how much more work we have to do. But what I also say to those people is, racism is still alive, but so are we, so are the people in this room, and so that, it's always hope that it can be changed.
Does activism work?
I'm often I don't particularly like the word activism. In part because when I was young, the activists in my life were like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, and they've done a lot of stuff in the world. But I don't see activism. They've done a lot of cool things.
They have done a lot of stuff. And they have done good things.
Yeah, absolutely. But I don't see it as a career. I think, to me, activism is if you want to be alive and you have a desire to see other people alive, then you're an activist, right? And so, it does work. And then there's also particular moments, right? Now there's social media, but in the 90s, there were people who were organizing on the west side of Chicago against gun violence. You just didn't have ABC or any news station there to cover it, right? And so now we have the opportunity to do it ourselves, and I can post a Twitter pic, and folks can retweet it and it can spread. So it works, it definitely works. Otherwise we wouldn't be talking about it.
The one thing that is talked about, I think, is a little off topic here, but in Chicago, but not enough nationally. The national version of Chicago is the caricature that we saw throughout the election, is that we are this violent, plagued city, and there is. Nobody's doubting that. But, and I'm a broken record here, but I've never seen a time since I've been here 20 years when there was more young creativity than ever before, which is really all races.
Absolutely.
And it's been incredible. And you were kind of part of that movement, and it started with, I think, open mics and everything. So talk about that.
Yeah, I was actually, I think that is interesting. I mean, Chicago is a very violent city. And that's true. But for me, I think the type of violence that we often give notice to isn't the kinds that the media talks about. It's violent to close mental health clinics in the city. It is violent to close schools. It is violent to ship jobs out of Chicago, right? That is a very violent thing that creates a larger problem than just, a homie shooting somebody, right? That's the type of violence that, and Chicago's had some very real bogus, terrible, little-fingered mayors for a long time. And so,
you're saying violence comes out of a set of conditions that doesn't allow people to love themselves.
Absolutely. That's what it's about. It's about love, man. It's about love, And not on some yo, what's up, boo? Where you at, love? Although, shout out to my boo. But it's about I believe wholeheartedly, Martin Luther King used to say that love is what justice looks like in public. And that's real. We have to be committed to what that kind of love means. And it means being uncomfortable. And it means having a very handsome, sexy black man come on this show and talk to a room full of white people and talk about the hard issues, That's what it's about.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to have something to balance the sexy white male.
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned Martin Luther King. Your name is Malcolm. Does it Any connection to Malcolm X?
Yeah, my middle name is Xavier.
Okay.
Yeah, my mom, when she was pregnant with me, the movie came out, and she tells me, like, she's
God,
like,
I'm old.
I know.
She was sitting there, she was like, that's gonna be my baby's name, and so, therefore, here I am.
Malcolm London, everyone.
Guests on the interview show all share one thing in common. They take risks. We'd like to thank Lifeway Foods, makers of probiotic kefir, for making possible this week's It Takes Guts interview.
So I have to say, I called you or emailed you several months ago to see if you'd come on the show, and you'd say, look, I'd love to at some point, but tomorrow I'm opening a restaurant, and the day after I'm having a baby. So, I mean, I guess you can plan when you have the restaurant, less the kid, but how did that all come together for you?
Yeah, of course you can't plan when you're gonna get pregnant, and things sort of happened much faster after the doctor's like, oh, just do it between this day and that day, and I was like, oh, done. So I was very lucky in that way, my husband and I were. And so when timing the restaurants on the opposite side, they take longer than they're supposed to. So we were supposed to open Duck Duck Goat, I think, a year before we did. The baby was supposed to come a year after it did, but it all kind of collided together. So I was standing on the line expediting when I was, we opened when I was 7 months pregnant. I was expediting a few days before I had the baby, Ernie. My doctor came in, and she was sitting at the bar, and I turned around and saw her, and she's like, what are you doing? I was like, well, we don't have a sous chef do this morning, so yes, Ernie's not coming for 3 more days, no big deal.
Well, congratulations on both,
Thank you.
particularly Ernie. That's
Thank you.
amazing. Do you have a dog named Bert, too?
We have a dog named Bert.
I remember that.
But also think of number 14 on the Cubs.
Yeah.
Ernie Banks. So
Bert
two
Banks.
meanings that came, Bert Banks, no. Ernie Banks and Ernie and Bert all kind of came together. So it's worked out.
That's great. Has he made an appearance in the restaurants?
Yes, he hangs out in the restaurants a lot. We actually, some of the girls that worked with me have an apartment upstairs as an office, and Ernie has a crib up there, so he hangs out upstairs, comes down to visit everybody at the restaurants during the day, so I can hang out with him and work at the same time.
Is he
It's
old enough
perfect.
to eat the food yet, or is he still not at that stage?
He's only 6 months old, but I did go to the doctor yesterday, and he said that we should just feed him everything, which seems
Really?
a little, I think my doctor
Bad
is
doctor,
very...
just a bad doctor.
Yeah, a little forward thinking. I was like, really? I was starting with some smashed up sweet potato, which he was not into. But yeah, I'm just gonna go for dumplings.
So let's talk about Duck Duck Goat. But I want to start with growing up. You grew up in Connecticut, I believe. You were born here, but grew up in Connecticut. What was your Chinese food eating experience?
It's fun. Well, my dad and my sister are in the audience, so they can test. We ate a lot of Chinese food. We ate a lot of all sorts of foods. My mom, I think chefs either become a chef because their mom was a great cook, and so they cooked with their mom and learned a lot of things, or their mom was a terrible cook and they just had to fend for themselves. And I'm fortunate that it was the first part of
Yeah.
that. But we used to,
So
my
nobody's
mom...
a chef who had a mediocre
Yeah.
parent as a cook. Okay.
They're probably a mediocre chef.
Chefs, that's right.
But my mom used to have her friend Mrs. Cole come over, and they would make Mandarin pancakes together. I think they just kind of sipped on wine all day and made Mandarin pancakes. It's quite the process, as my cooks know now. But we actually use her recipe still. We use that at DuckDuckGo for our Mandarin pancakes. And then they would go off to their families and have mushu pork for dinner. So those are the kind of things I grew up eating. Yeah. It wasn't just Chinese takeout. Of course, we did Chinese takeout. I mean, it's delicious. But we made it ourselves, too.
Was the inspiration Chinese food in America, or was it, I need to go to China and see what the real deal is?
Combination of the two. So we started off at Little Goat. We have a room upstairs, if anybody's been there. It's a private dining room. We do Sunday suppers, we call them, where we pick a random country and we cook all the foods from that country kind of to just learn ourselves and kind of push ourselves a little bit. And the first one that we did was Chinese food. And I spent that whole day, like, I made some dumpling wrappers that myself, and one of them I tried to make shumai, and it was a complete failure. But we made some tasty things. We made simple Americanized Chinese food. We made fried rice that was delicious, like cashew chicken, things that we get from takeout. And I brought it home and had it in the morning as takeout and thought, this is so much better. It's like not super greasy. We use butter instead of a lot of oil. Butter is really good. And it just, I thought to myself, oh, I should open a Chinese restaurant. So in my mind at first, it was not like a side project, but it was like, hey, I'm just gonna open up this Chinese restaurant just like the dinner we did the other night. No big deal. But as we started digging further, I thought, well, if I'm gonna open a Chinese restaurant, I wanna go to China. I hadn't been to China. So we went on a trip to China for a couple of weeks. Then a few months later, went on a trip to Taiwan. And we learned that everything we thought we knew about Chinese food, we had no idea. And that the food over there was much more delicious than everything that we grew up on. So decided to do a combination of the two. I mean, we have crab rangoon on the menu because crab rangoon's delicious, but Chinese people do not eat fried cream cheese. It's just nowhere, there's no dairy. So taking a combination of the things that like so many people have grown up loving and think are delicious, and some of the things that maybe are new for folks. So when they come in, they can have some new experiences. We make all our noodles, we make all our dumpling wrappers. It's like 12 to 13, 14, maybe doughs a day that we make for all the different dumplings and noodles. I think I was telling you upstairs before I came down, I learned how to make all those things on YouTube. So it's all been that. China, YouTube.
Yeah, why even spend the money to go to China?
Why go to China if you can just watch it on YouTube?
Yeah.
It's a good question.
It's fun.
It is fun. I think I thought when I went to China that we'd be able to learn more about the culture, and I think just seeing different foods, but there's not a lot of, hey, let me show you how we do this. It's more like ancient Chinese secret, we're not gonna tell you how we do this. So then it's come back. I did have one really nice gentleman show me how to make lamian, which is those noodles where they start with one piece of dough and then you keep stretching and suddenly there's thousands of noodles and it's like magic. But there's this secret powder that you have to put into the dough to make it stretchable to do that.
And you can do that now?
Well, I smuggled back a bag and I figured it out. Yeah. But then I tried to get more. And you can't find it in the US. If you go to a Chinese store here, you show them a picture, you're like, hey, I don't speak Chinese. They just laugh at you. Because you can't actually get it here.
Because they do have it, but they're like,
they
no
might,
way,
yes, not giving it to you. Yeah, no way,
that's
not
our
for
secret
you.
still.
Yeah, so I tried to have my friend in China, who lives in Beijing, send it to me, and it just got stopped at customs. So I was like, well, if it's illegal to use that, maybe I shouldn't. I'm not sure. It smells a little weird. It's just it's weird. Some sort of chemical I shouldn't know about. But yeah, so we've learned how to make different kinds of noodles, but just from watching YouTube. You can like look up a different kind of dumpling, watch 20 different videos, and look at all these different recipes and try them all out. And then we kind of figured out to try to understand why that starch, why that flour, why this much water, why do you boil water, why do you use cold water?
So how do you make it your own then? Or is it like on the menu, this was created by a 13-year-old YouTuber?
It says that underneath, just in really small print. Yeah, I took a bunch of recipes, formed them together, and just kind of finally understood it. And then we make do it ourselves, add our own sort of twists with different flavor profiles, I guess.
Can you ever make something, and I think the restaurant even says on the menu that it's reasonably authentic. Can you ever actually do it? Like my wife's family is from Russia, and her mom used to try to make Chinese food, and my wife said that she did it, but every time it tasted Russian.
Yeah.
and it was the use of cabbage mainly.
I'm thinking of like dumplings and vodka.
But can you make it and somebody would say, yes, I could not tell the difference? Or would they say, that's somebody who is from Chicago, moved to Connecticut, and then back to Chicago, and then went on one trip to China and watched some YouTube videos?
I think they're probably gonna go with that. And they're like, but surprisingly delicious. What a great path. I think reason to be authentic was to just point out the fact that no, we're not pretending that we're Chinese. When I was opening, I had a lot of people in interviews ask, so who's your Chinese chef gonna be? And I was like, this guy, I don't understand the question. Why would I be opening a restaurant where I wasn't the chef? But we know that that it's not completely authentic, and it becomes this whole deep question, well, what does authentic actually mean? And whatever, we're just trying to make delicious food and expose people. I don't know, that's a lot.
Is anything authentic? Deep.
Truly.
But, it's interesting because we are at a moment where people will say, both legitimately and completely ridiculously, that people are appropriating other cultures. So how do you think about that?
Yeah.
Or do you just say, this is what I want to do, I like the food, I'm not disrespecting it?
Yeah, I think it's always a point. I think I have a friend who opened a Chinese restaurant also up in Milwaukee, and he had a lot of people come out and say that his restaurant's called Dan Dan. They're both of the chefs are named Dan. I thought it was really clever, actually, Dan Dan Noodles. But they got a lot of Facebook and hate mail and things in the beginning that they were, kind of making fun of Chinese culture, perhaps, or just or bastardizing it, I would say a word was used probably. And he sent me called me afterwards. He's like, did you get a lot of this? I was like, I didn't actually read any of that stuff. I don't know. Hopefully not. But
how do you not read that stuff? You just stay above it, or you got a kid?
No, I don't read a lot. I just don't have a lot of time. I've learned a lot here tonight, by the way, for the first two guests. But I think, we try our best to celebrate the culture and, bring out the flavors and really show people some new things, but not pretend that we know, that we are Chinese or that we're trying to be anything more than we are. We just think it's great flavors and that it's fun, and that's all we try to do.
Was there a time in your life, now you've got a baby and you've got all these restaurants, was there a time when you'd be at the restaurant all night, then you'd go out and do whatever chefs do after hours, or was that never your life?
Yeah, it was my life until I was 35, I would say. I just turned 40 last month.
Nice.
So the last 5 years I've become much more tame. But yeah, when we first opened Girl in the Goat, and I can't believe that I survived that, I would stay on Expo until, we wouldn't be finished until like 12:31, and then we would go out for drinks. Sometimes there was times where I just like literally slept in the office, and this when I wore a chef coat, which was terrible. I was like wearing a chef coat, and I just like wake up and it's like 6 a.m. and like the bread makers would get there, and I'd be like, time to go. And like I literally did that. There was once Where
do you go? Where's the places that chefs don't want us to go?
To the hideout. But no, I of course have been here in the past, but we stay in the neighborhood. So Haymarket opened not too long after we did, so that's always a place where my staff hangs out. But it didn't really, sometimes we would just drink at the restaurant. I think when we first opened, and my partners were there too, so I can say that I was just drinking our liquor. It was like, it would hit like 10:30 and I'd be like, it's time for a Manhattan. And I would have the bartenders make me Manhattan, and like, yeah, if you came in for the last half hour, I'm sorry that I was expediting while I was tipsy. But it was just sort of after that long day, I just was ready.
What's going on at home? I heard you had different themed rooms. Now you have a baby. What's the baby's room like? The
baby's room is filled with animals. There's these stickers you can put on your wall, fathead stickers.
Yeah.
We have those all over. And he's just big enough where he's like looking at the hippopotamus, and there's like a giant pig. The problem is that these animals don't actually look like the real animals. I know they're cartoon fathead versions of them, so he might be confused later.
Kids figure that out.
Yeah,
absolutely. They
we went to the zoo. He was like, I don't think that's a giraffe, Mom.
Yeah.
That doesn't look like the giraffe in my room.
And then you've got other themed rooms. Is that true?
Yeah, we have a 70s basement. We have a giraffe room. It's orange, and there's like 40 giraffes in there.
Really?
Like not actual giraffes.
Yeah.
Well, I had a thing. I like wanted a pet giraffe. You can buy giraffes. People have pet giraffes. It's expensive. They don't like Chicago. Yeah, they do.
You need high ceilings.
Well, you just put it in a courtyard, and you have a second floor. This is my dream. This is my future.
So you just
This is
have
the only reason I work so hard is to get to this one day.
to have a courtyard.
A courtyard with a giraffe.
Well, that'd be great. I think we should end it on that note.
Yes,
A courtyard
perfect.
for a giraffe.
Yes, perfect.
Stephanie Izard, everyone.
Thank you.
The Interview Show would like to thank Cards Against Humanity, Lifeway Foods, It Takes Guts, Field Notes, vintage-styled, made-in-the-USA pocket notebooks at 401 North Racine in Chicago or fieldnotesbrand.com, and Lagunitas. Beer speaks, people mumble, except on The Interview Show.